Rumors Are True listeners, if you'd like to add me on Instagram and Facebook, it is at the Rumors Are True cast. If you'd like to like and subscribe, feel free, you know what to do. If not, no matter what, I really appreciate you listening. So, again, if you'd like to add me, you know the drill. If you'd like to subscribe, you know it even better. Thank you, guys.
Welcome, it's Jeremy Allen Gould. I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that in fact, the rumors that you have all heard are true. I started this podcast because I freaking love music. I was privileged enough to book amazing artists and bands in the past, and I was lucky enough to stay in touch with many of them to this day. This is a place to hear their stories. Thank you so much for riding along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true.
Thank you for tuning in again to this latest episode of the Rumors Are True podcast. My name is Jeremy, and today I welcome Joe Calderon. You know Joe from the band Lightworker on Solid State Records. Awesome conversation with Joe regarding his time growing up, learning to get into music, as well as his time again in the band Lightworker, who has a new record coming out very soon. So I hope you enjoy this latest episode with Joe Calderon. Joe, what is up, my friend? Thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
What's up, man? Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Tell me what's going on in your life. What's going on in your world right now?
Oh, man. Basically just my day job and then Lightworker. That's pretty much all that I do. That's so, yeah.
Where are you at? You up in Northern California, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work at Google,
nice.
Day job, and then and then I do Lightworker as I guess my second career. So
that's awesome. Do you go to a lot of shows out that way?
Used to. I think it's definitely narrowed down a little bit now that we've begun touring and stuff like that. But yeah, we used to go, like, especially growing up, like a whole ton. So
yeah, for sure. Speaking of, let's talk about growing up for you, man. Maybe some records, some bands, some influences, maybe even some shows that kind of put you on the path that you're on. And let's go from there.
Yeah. I guess, like, if we want to go way back, what kind of started music stuff for me was I grew up on a lot of classical music, a lot of Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Handel, and Tchaikovsky was a big one.
That's awesome.
And then my cousin was in kind of like an alternative, like, grunge band in the 90s. So, I grew up in this fairly conservative Christian home. So, like, and I'm first generation here. So, rock music in general was definitely a big no-no growing up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So when my cousin released this EP, and they all actually almost got signed to Roadrunner and everything. But
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. But I was just always intrigued by the music. My cousin Ralph, or Ralphie as we called him growing up, would be playing, whether it was Iron Maiden or Nirvana or Slayer or whatever, you know. He played drums in a band, and I would just kind of listen to that secretly, you know. And
Oh yeah.
and it's funny because looking back on it now, it's not like that heavy at all. I guess maybe at the time it felt heavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
But now it's just, you know, I mean, yeah, it's grunge, you know. So
Sure.
And then slowly from there, I think pop punk, I think, is definitely, especially for you know, I guess dudes our age or like kind of like the surrounding generations, is kind of what really was the first step towards heavy music as well. So like the Iron Maiden stuff growing up, coupled with like pop punk bands, and then I heard Finch and they added screaming to music, and I was like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And it was palatable. And then from there, you know, it just got into more bands of screaming and stuff like that. And then I would say that my roots are very solidly, especially when it comes to like heavier music, was definitely in the solid state world, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's kind of what put me on that path, was just my cousin way back in the, you know, in the mid 90s, like just playing in his own band, and it just always intrigued me.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you discovered, I know you kind of talked about the, you know, going from like the heavy and then the melodic, was it just, what was it about it that hooked you? Was it just the fact that the aggression of it, or was it basically the fact that it's something that you felt you could actually physically do?
For me, I think it's more emotion, as cheesy as that sounds.
Yeah.
But and that's why a lot of people growing up always were really surprised that I was not into hardcore as much.
Yeah.
Because that's a little bit more in the realm of like, hey, I'm spilling out guts here, you know. But I love riffs, man. Like that's like my favorite. So, and then back then, you know, I guess in the 90s, I mean, like the biggest metal band was Pantera, you know?
Yeah.
So, but you know, for me, you know, I didn't listen to that stuff quite yet. And so I was just looking for other bands that had like riffs and solos and stuff. And that's when, you know, I would say bands like Haste Today, early Haste Today, Zayo.
Yeah.
And stuff like, and not only that, I guess, you know, on a level, you know, I could relate to it a lot just because of how, you know, my background growing up.
Sure.
And then what was cool was the very first two, I guess, like underground CDs that I bought were Burning Bridges by Haste Today, and along with a Zayo compilation called Legendary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it had like everybody from Corey Darst to, you know, Sean Jonas to, you know, Dan, who's now currently, you know, still the vocalist. And I think, and it was kind of funny because I just realized this now that I'm talking about it out loud, but the Zayo stuff, I think I was very intrigued by because it was very creepy.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? And the subject matter was definitely not as like bright sounding as like,
sure.
But it's funny because Jimmy's screaming and Dan's are very similar.
Absolutely.
So, but they were saying very different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it, man. I totally understand what you're saying. You got the, you know, the positive, but also the not so much negative, but you know, it's definitely similar, but yeah, you are. They're two different paths of it for sure. I definitely was influenced on those records as well, so I definitely can relate to that. What's some other Solid State bands? You mentioned Solid State. I know you said Haste Today and Zayo, but what are some of the other bands on that roster that really kind of caught your eye?
Man, you name it, I was into it. Beloved was huge for me. And what I liked about them was that they did have a lot of riffs, and they were like the band that, I mean, you can't really describe the sound of Beloved.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know what I mean? Like, because one moment you have like kind of just like hard rock, and then out of nowhere you're going into a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then and Josh Moore's vocals are just like very charismatic and smooth.
Absolutely.
Which is a stark contrast from Joe, you know, who's like,
yeah, who's pretty brutal.
And it's raw, you know, like it's, and so but there was also like not necessarily metal riffs, but they were like sick guitar moments, and that's what I was really into. But Beloved was a huge one. I think I was more into the Tooth and Nail stuff first. So like Emery, The Week's End, you know, Dead Poetic, stuff like that. And then there was the Ferret stuff, you know,
Sure.
Early From Autumn to Ashes, and you know, In Flames, and I mean, I think they had a brief stint on Ferret. And just the Trust Kill stuff too. So
yeah, it sounds like a lot of the same stuff I listen to is just that melodic, aggressive hardcore. Put toe in the pool of metal, toe in the pool of hardcore and melody and all that. So yeah, man, I definitely can relate to that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the beginning of Lightworker. Just tell me kind of how things kind of came together, how you guys kind of met each other, and how the band started, and maybe, you know, the direction of the band that you guys decided to go.
Yeah, so Lightworker was started by me and my buddy Nick. He's no longer in the band, but he still remains a really close friend. I think I was just at a point where I didn't know if I wanted to play music anymore, but I had this one leftover song from my prior band that Ryan, our drummer, happened to be in as well. And that was just one song that was like, it just never was realized. We just didn't have the budget to finish it, you know, when you're in your late teens, early 20s. So we recorded 3 other songs, and that was just left over. And my buddy Nick could record very well, especially at the time. He was only like 19 or something.
Wow. And
so I didn't have a ton of money, but I was just like, hey, if I give you this bass, will you record this long this last idea I have, and then I'll just put it out there, you know, just whatever, you know. And so, and that song was Cholera, and that song is off of our first record, but it's by far the oldest song that has existed in the Lightworker realm. Not the oldest guitar part, but definitely the oldest song as a whole, you know.
Sure.
And then Nick ended up liking that stuff, and then he was just showing me some other riffs, and one thing led to another, and we decided to just kind of make this project that was initially called Red Sky, and then went to Red Skies, and then ultimately Lightworker. But we started working on the Resilience EP, and befriended a guy named Josh Barber, who's, worked with bands such as Norma Jean.
Oh, is he in KC?
I don't know.
I think he is. I think I know who you're talking about.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
But and he was initially supposed to work on that band prior to Lightworker, but we broke up. So I stayed in contact with him. And then so it was just me and my buddy Nick, and we hired the drummer that is a friend of Josh's, and his name is Miles McPherson, who he's like a big time like country drummer in Nashville.
Oh, nice.
And he actually drummed for Paramore for a bit. Wow. And on some of the recordings, some studio recordings he did was like for Mailing and the Sons of Disaster, some 90s bands like Tonic and Lit.
Nice. That's good stuff.
Yeah. So, and it kind of started there, and then we decided to kind of like, I guess we didn't want too many cooks in the kitchen, so we started off the band, and then as the songs, like we selected like the songs that most of them which appear on the Resilience EP, we decided that okay, we've got enough songs now to play live. Now let's start piecing together a band.
Yeah.
And that's when we reached out to a handful of dudes. One guy's name was Ryan, who's in Lightworker now, and he joined for like a few months and then left because he moved to Southern California, like about 9 hours away or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, he left, but was replaced by a dude named Kenny, and Kenny was our drummer up until we got signed. And then we had a guy named Rob join, who was formerly of Fallujah, also All Shall Perish, so more
nice. Yeah.
extreme metal stuff, you know. And then there was Grayson, who is an old buddy of mine from a band from a long time ago, and which is a cool story within itself as to like how he ended up joining. But he ended up joining on bass, even though he's plays guitar in Lightworker now. But initially his job was, bass and backing melodic vocals. And so he joined, and that kind of rounded up the lineup for Resilience. And then once we started getting into writing for Fury by Failure, it was just me, Kenny, Grayson, and there was this dude named Druva who just stepped into the lead guitar role and helped co-write some of the songs that you hear on Fury by Failure. And then ultimately now it's just the three of us. Ryan came back right before, right as we signed to Solid State. And and then there was another dude named Brad who joined also for a time during the Fury by Failure cycle. Still a good pal of ours, plays in another band. But Ryan, me, and Grayson remain, and yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
That's awesome, man. Well, you mentioned the Resilience EP. Let's talk about that briefly. Looking back on that, you put it out. Does it kind of bring a buzz for you? How are things going with that? Do you find yourself, I guess you're writing these songs. Are you like, wow, we've got something special? Is it, I guess kind of just take me through that time.
That time was, just like I haven't thought about that time for a while, but it was fun, a little stressful.
Sure.
But, I think we actually almost broke up at the time because we, lost one of our main, Nick decided to leave. And I was just kind of burnt out. I didn't know if I wanted to do it anymore. So I was like, we're just going to put out this EP and then play a couple shows and we'll be done. And then I'll just work on being a tech bro, I guess. Grayson and Kenny really just pushed to keep moving forward. So we wrote those songs, and it took about 3 or 4 years to put them out.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was kind of going on behind the scenes that really delayed everything. So by the time they came out, the songs were already ancient. And we actually had written a handful of other songs that we put out as individual singles. Because the plan initially was we're going to release like some standalones, like 2 or 3 standalones, just to, get the hype going, even though we had the, EP, and then put out the EP and then start kind of like working on a new record and, kind of shopping around and whatnot for labels. But, so a lot of things were just moving at a snail's pace. But by the time we released the Resilience EP, we were actually Grayson and I were already cooking up stuff for Fury by Failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it started to sound a bit different. a little bit heavier than the Resilience EP stuff. The Resilience EP stuff, I think, when we were working on that EP, I realized that my screaming abilities had drastically changed because I hadn't screamed for like 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
So so we had a bass player at the time who did a lot of the screaming on that record. It wasn't actually me.
Wow.
I did a good chunk, but but it was mainly the lows. I had completely forgotten and I couldn't figure out how to do highs again. So we were just kind of trying to go for more of I guess, Defiance or Woven War kind of approach, where it's just like, okay, like we're a metal band, but it's mainly singing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of what you hear on the early Lightworker stuff. But as we began to work on the Fury by Failure stuff, we realized that, okay, Grayson just told me, he's like, you're just going to have to scream more, dude. And I was just like, dude, I'm not even sure if I want to, you know?
Yeah.
And then during the process of us actually recording that Fury by Failure, I had to reteach myself how to scream.
That's crazy.
And so it was, and so, I know we're jumping ahead, but like that's why when we released the new song off of our upcoming record, it was really cool and validating to see that people were saying that the screams like sounded like more full and whatnot.
That's awesome.
Because yeah, I've had time now. I've been on the road and I've been able to kind of figure out, you know, what my voice sounds like. I've never been a frontman of a band before until this band. So.
Yeah. So you've discovered your voice. That's cool. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about how obviously you put the EP out in Solid State. You obviously eventually signed with it. Was there any other labels looking at you as well? And why did you? I know you mentioned you were a Solid State kid. Was that the dream come true for you? I guess just kind of talk me through signing with Solid State.
Yeah, I mean, so when we started working on the Fury by Failure stuff, there was like one or two guys who wanted to work, or I wanted to work with rather, and we ended up going with Dan from now Fit for a King fame, and also Phineas too, but Phineas was his main thing back then. So we went with him, and because he lived in Southern California, so we're like, okay, we don't have to, you know, travel too far.
Sure.
And from my understanding, it was kind of like, you know, he really believed in the stuff. And, you know, I don't want to speak for Daniel, but one thing he has said was that he's usually joined established bands already.
Yeah.
So with us, he was just kind of like, I kind of feel like, you know, okay, this is a fresh band that, you know, like I can kind of help out, you know?
Sure.
So he, I guess he just kind of told folks at Solid State, like, hey, I'm working with this band. I think they'd be a good fit. And they were like, okay, cool. Like, you know, just send over songs and as they're done. And that's kind of, and so there wasn't, to answer your question, like there weren't any other labels because Solid State kind of snatched us up pretty quick.
That's awesome.
Without even touring or anything.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And that was like, those were some real exciting times.
I bet it was.
Yeah. So,
you know, dream come true for you, really, if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. So
what when they signed you, was it was the record pretty much done, or did you just go right into the studio?
So that's a funny story. So basically what ended up happening was we backtrack a little bit. So I became homies with a dude named Chris LeMasters, who was in a side project with Corey from Norma Jean called 100 Suns.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was also in a band prior to that called Dead and Divine.
Oh yeah, yep.
And now is currently in a band called Teeth. But anyhow, he was just like, hey, dude, so I see you're in a band. Like, do you have any stuff that you're cooking up? And we were like, yeah, so we showed him the stuff that we were working on with Dan, and he was like, this is really good. Objectively, what I'd like to hear is you guys work with a vocal producer to kind of tighten up some of the vocal stuff,
Sure.
So he introduced us to Bo Burchell from Seosin.
Oh, nice. Yes. Yeah.
And so we just started working with Bo. And so we had finished up the record pretty much. It was all mixed, and we were just getting it mastered, and we were waiting for the masters. And that's when we actually wanted to show the label. That way we could just be like, boom, done.
Ready to go. Yeah.
It's done, like, let's go. And but Corey, he knew about us, Corey from Norma Jean, and he kind of accidentally let the cat out of the bag.
Oh gosh.
And I talked to him about it about a year or so ago, and it was pretty funny. He was just like, because basically, I guess he was talking to Adam from Solid State, and he was like, hey, so yeah, anything else you want? I guess they were wrapping up some Norma Jean stuff or something, and he's like, oh, anything else? And he's like, oh yeah, my bandmate from 100 Sons is managing a band called Lightworker, and yeah, like, I've heard some of the stuff. It's pretty cool. And at that point, Adam already knew about us because of the band. So that kind of when Adam heard about that, I guess that kind of set a trail of events off. So, like, at that point, he was like, oh, okay, well, Dan's working with them. We got this other endorsement, from Corey. So he immediately hit up Chris, and everybody was out of town, and that was in the band except for me at the time. And Chris just hits me up, and he was like, hey, do we have the masters yet? And I'm like, no. And then I was like, why? And he was all like, dude, Solid State wants to hear it now.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, shit. So we were just like, dude, we just have the final mixes. And he's like, better than nothing. Like, let's just show them, because they'll get the idea, right? So
yeah.
Sent over the final mixes, and then we just kind of held our breaths. And then Adam wanted to have further discussions and kind of went from there. But yeah, Corey was like kind of the catalyst of starting that final part of the process,
That's awesome, man. I love hearing that. Yeah. Oh, let's talk about the Fury by Failure record. You kind of mentioned it earlier. It's been a couple years. Looking back on it, how do you feel about it? Maybe thoughts, memories from that time recording that record. I know you said you kind of had it pretty much ready to go, but anything from that time that you just remember that you look back fondly on?
Yeah, definitely. I think meeting Bo was definitely a highlight, and working with Dan. We had a lot of fun on those writing sessions with Dan. We went down to where he lived at the time and just like crashed at his place in his living room, and just worked from when we got up until we were tired, we would start working at like 9:30 and then just keep going until like 1 a.m. And it was a blast getting to know Dan, kind of asking him questions about not only Phineas but the music business as a whole and whatnot. And it was great. And then working with Bo, that's when things got a little crazy, because we got down there the first day, and on the way down there, I just look at Grace and I'm like, dude, I hate to say this, but I think I'm getting sick.
Oh gosh.
And the thing is that we paid for everything out of our own pocket,
Yeah.
So it's like, working with these gentlemen is, just doing production and working on a record is just not cheap in general.
Sure.
So, and we didn't know Bo at the time, so we're just like, well, we don't know what he's going to say.
Sure.
Or my voice would actually, hold up, because at that point I had never toured or anything like that. So I didn't know how to,
condition your voice or get it ready, yeah.
Exactly. So like, and I'm still learning that. Like I said, being a frontman is still a relatively new thing for me. So we get there first and we tell him what's going on, and the first night I kill it. We we recorded pretty much all of that song Empire, which we have a video for.
Yeah.
And and then I remember Bo being like, dude, I am stoked. Like he was just like, yeah, this is sick. And the next day the next day, like 20% of my range just got cut off. And then the next day another 20%. And it was just like, I think we're gonna just have to go home and we're gonna have to reschedule. And so we had to he's obviously a busy guy, so we had to kind of work around that, and we went back and then finished most of the vocals, and then a lot of the screaming and stuff. Since I had been working on relearning how to scream, I did at Grayson's house at the time, we were able to wrap it up that way. But the times were like, there was pressure, but it was a lot of fun. Bo's a really fun guy to be around, and that's the reason why we went with him for the second record, right? So we were really stoked about how our first record came out. Looking back on it now, definitely proud of that record. I think that Fury by Failure definitely has a special place in my heart. It was a really special time that was unfortunately overshadowed by 2020, which we don't get into.
Sure.
But because we got signed in October of 2019. And so, we were just like ready to go and whatnot. And then obviously 2020 hit, but we rolled with the punches. We're a pandemic band, so to speak, in that regard. And I know a lot of pandemic bands, they definitely didn't get a chance to go out there and kind of
Yes, absolutely.
So and a lot of bands definitely didn't make it past those handful of years. So I'm glad that we were able to push forward and whatnot. So the recording experience and everything in itself in that regard was amazing.
That's awesome. That's cool.
But when we released Fury by Failure, we're doing exactly what we're doing now, and just having beers over Skype as we counted down when the first song would drop, and it's but this time it was different, and it was a lot more fun. And
that's awesome. That's exciting, man. Oh, let me ask you this: when you finally heard like the final mixes for Fury, what were your thoughts? How did you feel? I mean, obviously, you said you felt like you killed it the first day, so it's like when you finally heard the finished product, what was that like?
Oh, we were ecstatic. I think there's just for me personally, I think there's one song on there that I'm not the biggest fan of. But like for me, otherwise, I'm very proud of what we did at the time, and all it did was like fuel the fire for me to want to get heavier.
Sure.
And especially as I learned how to like scream and or use the new technique and whatnot. But yeah, we were just completely thrilled. We would show our friends and whatnot. The label was stoked about it. Everybody was stoked about it. So, and then the reception was great too. It was definitely a very special time for us, even amidst the weirdness that was 2020.
No, totally. I wanted to mention I loved the artwork for it. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was so cool. Did the Clark brothers do that, Ryan or
Ryan Clark?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had Don Clark on a while back. He's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, those guys are just uber talented. How was that? How did that make you feel having that on, like their stamp on your record?
Dude, just one of the most validating things ever. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
It's because I mean I grew up listening to Demon Hunter as well, and I mean he worked on stuff for Alice in Chains and Stone Sour and Foo Fighters, and just like, whoa, like, so the fact that he actually, I guess took our vision and ran with it. And then I remember we got the artwork back and I was like, that's it. And Grayson's all like, you think so? And I'm like, dude, that's it. And he was sick. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it definitely stood out for sure. It was just a, not only the color combination, but just overall, it just kind of made you, it's like if you walk in a record store, you'd be like, oh, that's interesting. What's that? That type of thing. So I thought that was really cool, avenue for you guys, at least to, and again, 2020, no one's going to record stores much at that point, just because with everything going on. So I'm sure that probably wasn't as prevalent, but overall, it sounds like you're really ecstatic on the way that record came out. I mean, I thought it was fantastic. I'd never heard of you guys, and when I heard it, I was like, wow, this is intense. It was heavy, but it was melodic, and it just had that good sound. And yeah, man, that's a really cool record. I'm glad that it was something that you can look back fondly on. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's talk. So I guess obviously you're not touring because of 2020 and 2021. Did you wind up playing any shows in between the records at all, and any tours or anything like that?
Yeah, we played one show right before things got really bad, and then we did play, if I'm not mistaken, late 2021. We actually did a week-long kind of thing with The Undertaking and Fall Star, and that was kind of like our first exposure to actually being on any semblance of a tour, and then which was really fun. That was it was a lot of fun. And then we went out with Spirit Breaker and in 2022 for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then which was also a lot of fun. And yeah, so we've been trying to I guess get out on the road as much as possible, and as much as much as it's like I guess feasible for us.
Sure. Totally.
And for us, it's like, it's definitely, I think with this new record, we're going to be pushing the envelope even harder. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And whatnot. But yeah, we did tour a little bit off of Fury by Failure. Not as much as we had hoped, but we definitely did.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about the new record. It's coming out in, you said April, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's talk about the new record. And you mentioned working with Bo again. Tell me about the new record. What are your thoughts on it? And I'm sure you're excited for it. So let's talk about that record.
Yeah. So for the new record, we basically went back with the same team. The roles were a little bit adjusted, but Dan came back again and helped us with co-writing and song structure and whatnot. And then we went to Bo to record, and he produced it and mixed it. But it was pretty much just the same team, but we all kind of knew each other, at that point.
Yeah.
And we knew going into this second record that we wanted it to be heavier. For a variety of reasons. Fury by Failure was the way that it was calculated, the way that it was it sounded, because we just growing up, you could see that certain bands, when they would break through, if they tried something new, sometimes fans would be like, nah, they would just, and so we were just like, we don't want that. We don't want to be pigeonholed. So like the first album is really a compilation of everything that we kind of like to do.
Sure.
And then the second album was just like, that's when we were just like, okay, we're going to zero in on kind of this heavier approach. And that's something that like I said, we knew that even before a single note was written. We knew that even before 2020, that the second one was going to be a heavier outing. And that's kind of what, we told Dan and Bo. That was like the objective, and I think we definitely, like, people, you know, after releasing First Light, I mean, people were just like, whoa.
Dude, it's so heavy. It's so freaking heavy. My back still hurts from listening to it, like, for real. It's so good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're really pumped on it. I mean, like I mentioned about Fury by Failure, very proud of it. Love the record. There was one track that I'm kind of iffy on, but on this new record, I'm extremely proud of all 10 tracks. This was definitely, and I know I can speak for Grayson on this because we've talked about it so much, but this was definitely the hardest collection of songs that I've ever been a part of writing.
Yeah.
The writing process was very, very difficult. And not because, you know, we were fighting or anything like that. It's just the circumstances that surrounded us, you know, whether it was this, 2020 and 2021, and then, or, throughout the process of the last handful of years, like Grayson went through writer's block. We each one of us in the band, like, kind of went through our own little mental kind of, we just needed time to ourselves.
No, I get that.
And it was very difficult. And coincidentally, that's a good chunk of, I mean, First Light, I mean, that song is about one of those episodes for me, personally. And on the final track, Grayson even sprinkles some stuff in from his experience on the title track. And but we're immensely proud of this. I think we when you go out and play shows and see how people respond to stuff, and that kind of fuels your fire to, like, be like, oh, okay, that was sick. Like, not that we're necessarily writing things for people, but it definitely helps when it's like, hey, they're having fun, I'm having fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's have more fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the new record called?
How the Beautiful Decay.
How'd you come up with that?
So I didn't know this until afterwards. I'm actually a pretty big Darkest Tower fan, but I'm not super familiar with their early stuff. But apparently there was a song that was called How the Beautiful Decay, which was the name of a local band that me and Grayson were friends with growing up. And so we were just like, well, dude, that kind of just matches what we're trying to do with this record. And I think it's a pretty strong statement, you know.
Sure.
And I think it just, it describes lyrically, I think, a lot of the stuff that we're discussing and how we've been feeling. So, it was kind of funny. We actually chose the name of the record before a single note was written for.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What does Solid State think of it?
They were stoked about it. And especially once they saw the artwork, they were just kind of like, oh, okay, it definitely kind of gives you, it's a lot of grays and blacks and stuff like that. And on the front cover, you have like a whole bunch of dead butterflies on the bottom. Sounds very morbid saying it out loud, but we still carried over that, color from the first record with the teal.
Yeah.
And so I think we all, label and everybody else included, just we're just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. You're kind of continuing the story, so to speak.
Yeah. Who did the artwork for this one?
Her name is Bailey Zindel.
Cool.
So
awesome.
Yeah, we're very, very stoked on how it came out.
I know you mentioned, your band kind of was a COVID band, essentially, or a pandemic band, as you said. Do you feel like this is a new opportunity for you, kind of, because it's like you've been around, but you haven't, like you said, you haven't been on these tours as much as you'd want to, or do you feel like this is just a new opportunity to kind of put your stamp on things?
Absolutely. Like, in a lot of ways, and I know, the label and definitely, friends of ours like Bo or Dan, they definitely see this as like, okay, yeah, this is our sophomore record, but it kind of is our first album cycle.
Coming out party. Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely. And I think we kind of, in a way, it was kind of a blessing too, because since we weren't able to tour as much on the first record, it kind of gave you a taste of what to expect. So that way we can hit it harder, this time around.
Sure.
So, yeah, we're super pumped about that. Can't wait to hit the road. We're going to be hitting the road with I Set to Kill, and
okay.
That band we played a few shows with them last summer, and they're awesome people. So
that's great. That's awesome. And it looks like you got a show in Baltimore soon too, like at a festival. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay, I don't know about Baltimore.
Yeah, it's in Connecticut. Yeah, we're playing a festival with I think it's August Burns Red, Nothing More. I Set the Kills on there, and then a bunch of other bands. And we're really looking forward to that one because we've been wanting to get to the East Coast for a while. So this will be, definitely. And I love the East Coast. I've been there, just on my own, and I love just that part of the country. So very, very, very pumped to go out there and just meet new people and hang out.
Yeah. I want to ask you about playing live. When you have played live, have you seen, obviously some people know your record. So what's that like when people are singing your lyrics or grabbing the mic or, whatever it may be?
Dude, it's so awesome. This past tour that we did, it was quite hilarious because there's this one dude who was in the crowd and he was singing every word. So I just handed him the mic and, he just sang the whole chorus, and I just moseyed over to the kick drum and just started drinking water. And I looked at him and he's just playing, and I just smile at him, and he's all like, where is the microphone? And I point, and he's like, oh, sick. I just kind of just took a break for a second, and it just, it's a very overwhelming feeling. And it same with, and as a heavy band, I feel like we kind of almost get spoiled too, because, and I remember Thrice saying this when they kind of went from like heavy to a little bit more like softer and whatnot.
Sure.
Like at first it was very difficult for them to tell if people were actually into the music, because before the expression was just moshing,
Yeah, totally.
and crowd surfing and stuff. But like when you get to lighter music and whatnot, it's kind of, it's a little bit more difficult to tell. Yeah. So, when you're the kind of like the catalyst of mayhem, ensuing in the crowd, it's there's no better feeling. And it's funny because I've never been a big mosh person myself, but I love being the instigator. Sure.
Yeah, man. Let me tell you. Let me ask you this. I know you can't predict the future, but what does the future look like for you and the band?
For us, playing a lot more shows, tours, and whatnot. We've it took us a little while to get this new music out, so I think we kind of have a way to make sure that we're kind of a little bit more of a well-oiled machine in that regard. Just touring and playing more, and getting this music out to as many people as possible, which is, I think, most bands would say. But and also looking forward to creating new music, because even though this record has been, it's a new record, there's already stuff that we are like, hey, we kind of wish we would have done this, so we're already kind of lightly looking ahead at what the next step is going to be, even for us sonically. We'll, any opportunities that come our way, we're just stoked for them, and we're stoked to get to know more people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. I know you and I have talked over the past year or so, and it's been really cool to kind of get to know you via text, if you will. But it was really cool to talk to you, and I'm really stoked for the future for you guys. I'm stoked for this record. I definitely think you have something to say, and I appreciate you coming on, and I hope wish you well.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, hopefully we'll get to hang out soon. Maybe when you're on the East Coast. Maybe if you come to the South. We'll get to hang out sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Joe. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Hey, thank you to the listener for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Awesome that you repeatedly come back. So I deeply appreciate it. Thank you for the shares, the likes, the subscribes, all that stuff. So thank you again for that. Joe Calderon, thank you so much for your time. Awesome conversation. So cool to get to know you. And I'm really excited for the future for Lightworker. So thank you again, Joe. Got some incredible artists on the horizon. And guys, nostalgia, it's still a heck of a drug.